Welcome to Local Everywhere. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Harry Abrams. Harry Abrams lives in California and he's familiar with a lot of stars that we watch in the movies. And he wrote a book called Let's Do Launch. So, Harry, tell us about your background in Hollywood.
Um, I'm I was in artists representation, or that's another term for being a talent agent.
Okay.
I was in that for close to 60 years. I started back in well, whenever I've forgotten exactly the year, but 60 years back from now, and which would have been 1962 or 1960, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to school here locally. I went to UCLA college, and I graduated from college. Went into the military for 6 months. Came out of the military and started looking for a job, and wanted to get into the talent agency business, but and so I interviewed with a couple of different talent agencies that had training programs. One was called MCA, which was another name for Music Corporation of America. And the other talent agency that had a training program was the William Morris Agency. They were also a large agency. And I interviewed there for a position in their training program. Uh, I would start out in the mailroom in each of their training programs, and I would be paid $40 a week. That was my pay. It was the same pay everyone went through. And so I wrote. I graduated from UCLA. I had a degree in business, so I was able to write a letter to the um, directors of human resources, the personnel directors, and they interviewed me and then had me be interviewed by 10 different department heads at the respective talent agencies, motion picture department, television department, theater department, radio and television commercial department, personal appearance department. They had different talent heads. That these were large agencies. And I interviewed with those 10 department heads over a period of about 3 months. And I figured that once I was able to get through all of the interviews, that I'd get a letter or an offer to come to work for one of the talent agencies. And I got letters from both of them that told me that I had successfully passed the interview process, but my name would be placed on a list of all of the people who had preceded me and it had been approved. And so I said, well, how long before my name will get to the top of the list? A month, 2 months, 6 months, a year? They couldn't tell me. Just don't call us, we'll call you. And
Mm.
so as a result, my parents, who had been very upset with me to begin with, to change my major from pre-medicine at UCLA to business, said, Harry, get a job. And I took a job working in the Midwest. My uncle uh, was a buyer of housewares for the Thrifty Drug chain, which is about 80 stores up and down California. And he bought one of the items he bought were power lawnmowers. He introduced me to the man who owned a power lawnmower factory in Richmond, Indiana. And he hired me, took me to, said, come work for us in production of power lawnmowers. And I went there while I waited for my name to rise to the top of the
Mhm.
list at one of these talent agencies. And about, let's say, 14 months later, my mother called me to tell me there was a letter from William Morris Agency. I said, well, open it up. She opened it up and it said, Dear Harry, the position is opened up for you in the mailroom, and here at the William Morris Agency, you have 72 hours to accept the position. If you don't, we're going to move on to the next person. And I said I had made a decision based upon the interviews that I had with the two respective um, personnel directors and with the agents that I met at the department, their department heads. My perception of the two agencies with the MCA training program was superior to that at the William Morris Agency. So I took a chance, and I said I turned the job down at the William Morris Agency. But before I did that, I called MCA to be sure my name was still on the list, and it was. And I said, any idea when you'll get around to be? We can't tell you, Harry. Well, about 4 months later, I got the letter came from MCA, said you have 24 hours to accept the position in our mailroom for $40 a week in our training program. I said, I don't need 24 hours. When do I start? And that's how I got started in the
Mm-hmm.
talent agency business, but it took a long period of time. Sorry
Mm-hmm.
to bore you with all those details.
That's fine. So you work your way up through the ranks.
Yes, I went in the training program and I was in training for about a year, and then they elevated me into the radio and television commercial department, is what I
Mm-hmm.
was at MCA. And I started working representing talent for radio and television commercials. And I also, that department also covered the area of live daytime television, broad, covered broadcast journalists, radio disc jockeys, radio performers, people like that. It also covered radio and television commercials, the use of the voice on radio and television commercials, and the use of the on-camera presence on commercials. And that's where I started in that department at,
Mm-hmm.
at MCA.
So you must have met a lot of interesting people throughout the years, haven't you?
Oh yes, a lot of interesting people. Not only interesting people who were presidents of networks or presidents of advertising agencies. Those were my buyers or casting directors and people like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
also had a lot of interesting people on the other side, on the talent side, on the artist side, because that's
Uh-huh.
the side that I was in.
Who stands out as in your mind as the most memorable?
Well, uh, I'm um, I'm responsible for discovering uh, some important talent, needless to say.
Okay.
Uh, uh, and I don't know that I could pick one out that was most memorable, but I can tell you some of the people that I found, discovered, launched, and built careers for. Would that
Okay,
help?
go ahead.
One would be Jennifer Lopez. I'm totally responsible for finding Jennifer Lopez
Uh-huh.
and taking her on for representation and signing her to a talent agency contract and representing her for the first few years. Uh, what happens with a performer is once their career is launched and they become in demand and famous, uh, they might leave an agency like mine, since I was a small agency, independent agency, and they and she did. She left me after about 3 years to go to a large agency like a creative artists agency,
Mm-hmm.
CAA. But uh, I was involved. I mean, I represented her, and I put her to work on a television series, put her to work in a few pictures and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, I'm responsible for Jacqueline Smith. Do you know that name at all?
Yes, she was with Charlie's Angels, right?
Put her on Charlie's Angels. Yeah.
Yes.
Her. I found her in Central Park, actually, when I was living and working in New York. Took her on for representation and uh, Excuse me, there's just a little noise in the background. Um, uh, I took her on for representation, found her in Central Park, represented her for the first few years, put her on to Charlie's Angels, and then I didn't continue on with her, needless to say, again, because she went to a much larger agency.
Mm-hmm.
Another talent I'm responsible for is Liam Neeson. You know that name?
No, I
Liam,
don't.
Liam, Liam, Neeson, Neeson. Well, he's a well-known feature picture star, basically. Uh, and Others that I found were people like, let me see, Sterling K. Brown. You may not know that name.
Mm-mm.
Another one would be see, Katie Holmes. Do you ever hear of her?
Mm-hmm.
She uh, Dawson's Creek, a television series.
Right.
I found her, represented her, and I put her to work on that show.
When
And
you say you found her, where do you usually discover your talents?
they come from just about anywhere. In the case of Jacqueline Smith, I found her in Central Park. I was living in Central Park. I was living in New York with my wife and my two small children. And I found her one day when we were on a picnic in Central Park, and she was there with she had come from Houston, and she was had been in the Houston Ballet. She was trying out for New York City Ballet, and she was there with a bunch of girls who were also auditioning for New York City Ballet,
Mm-hmm.
and she she they put on a show there. My wife and I, with our two small children, small boys, were there having a picnic, and they ended up when they finished their dance program. They came over to have a soda right near us. My toddler son, my 3-year-old toddler son, toddled over to them. And after about 10 minutes, I went over to rescue the girls from him. And this one girl had taken an interest in him and was talking to him. And this girl was Jacqueline Smith. She was exquisite looking, and
Mm-hmm.
said to her, she had an accent so thick you could cut it with a knife. Houston. And I said to her, if things don't turn out well for you and you don't get into New York City Ballet, here's my card, give me a call.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about maybe doing some television commercial work. And so she called me 2 weeks later, came in to see me, and I put her to work, signed her onto the agency, and I first put her to work for Breck, all the Breck hair products, Breck
Mm-hmm.
shampoo, Breck, whatever, all the various assembly products. And she became very famous as a result of that. I also sent her to a dialogue coach to get rid of her southern accent. And then sometime, maybe several months later, um, Aaron Spelling, who was a well-known television producer of television programs out of Los Angeles, out of
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood. He called me, he was casting a television pilot called Charlie's Angels.
Mm-hmm.
And he told his casting director, I want to see that girl who does the Breck commercials. And
Mm-hmm.
they hired her. She ended up on that show. And that show became famous. They were on for several seasons. Anyway, that's my story about Jacqueline Smith.
Oh, that's wonderful. I remember reading a long time ago that people have different facial angles which the photographer tried to get the better side. But I remember reading about Jacqueline Smith that there was no better side. Her whole face was absolutely beautiful.
That's correct. You could not, the photographer or the cinematographer couldn't shoot from any respective angle without getting a spectacular shot. I guess if they shot the back of her head, maybe they couldn't tell that.
Right. So, in all of your years of finding talent, you wound up writing a book called Let's Do Launch. Tell us a little bit about your book and why you decided to write it.
Okay, the inspiration for that book is interesting. First of all, I worked for, as I say, close to 60 years with my agency, built it up to become a successful agency. I sold the agency about 5 or 6 years ago. At the time I sold it, they had 150 people working for Abrams Artist Agency was the name of the agency. I had offices in Los Angeles and in New York, and it was a very successful operation. Uh, and uh, I decided to write the book. I was going to say that in the last 5 or 6 years before I sold the agency, a number of people would come to me, uh, from either outsiders or insiders, people who worked in the industry would say, Harry, you've had such a successful career in the talent agency business. Why don't you write a book? And I would say to them, well, I was terribly flattered, but, but quite frankly, I was then working 10 or 12 hours a day. I didn't have the time to write a book. So eventually, when I sold the company 5 or 6 years ago, I had the time to write the book. But I'm not a writer myself. So I hired a co-writer, a man by the name of Rod Thorne. It was recommended to me. Had written several books about business. And the inspiration for writing the book was I felt that, uh, interestingly enough, there are two sides uh, to Let's Do Launch. Number one, I would encounter during my years as a professional business person, I would encounter many different individuals along the way who were in different walks of life, different professions, had selected different career paths, and had built careers along those lines. And frequently, I would encounter I would encounter people who were unhappy or dissatisfied with their career choice, with their career path, and uh, they would uh, they wanted to change careers, and there this would happen frequently with lawyers or attorneys, and they frequently would want to get in the entertainment industry, but they weren't the people I would encounter were business people. They weren't artists. They had no artistic talent. They weren't a performer. They weren't a writer. They weren't a director, and so they wanted to get in the business side of it. And I would talk to them about the business side of the entertainment industry. There's no better way to learn it than to get into the talent agency business and get into a training program and start from the bottom. So I would I would help them, I would guide them, and this happened a lot over my professional career early on, maybe the first 5 or 10 years. Even what happened later on as well. And I would get them into the entertainment industry. Uh, Excuse me just a second, Cynthia. There's a little noise outside my door here. I want to just quiet it down.
Sure.
Be right back. Could I get you guys to move to another room while I'm talking to someone here on an interview? Just to another room, maybe the living room. Sorry, Cynthia, I'm back
It's
now.
okay.
Uh, so, uh, so that was the inspiration for writing the book. So let's do launch, which is a play on words of let's do lunch, which is, you know, I thought that was, I didn't come up with that title, by the way. I don't take the credit for that title. that was the credit would go to my co-writer who came up with that. I thought it was a clever title. And so it's not only the launching of a career for a business person in the entertainment industry, it's also the launching of a career of a performer, of an artist as well. So the book is a couple hundred pages about how to build a career, either in business or as an artist. So
Mhm.
that tells you it's a long-winded response to what was the inspiration for the book.
So it seems like you had a good time over the past number of years, right? What with what you do?
I enjoyed it. I really did. It was a career choice that I made and turned out to be quite interesting. It was well, it was fortunate to be successful at it. I had a good uh, training, business training for 4 years at UCLA, and I just I responded to it. I built a business.
Did you ever date any of the beautiful women that you got into the business with?
I did not because I was careful about that.
Okay.
Didn't want to get confused or accused, so to speak, or
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to favoring certain people other than others. But I know I never did date any of them. I would I would go to business meetings with them. About 15, 20 minutes. Okay. Yeah. I would I would go to business meetings. I'd go to if they are luncheons or dinners or where they would be honored. I would accompany them, or if they were being given an award or something of that nature, I would accompany the artist. But no, I did not. I was not I was not inclined to do that.
So why do you think people who want to get ahead in their careers, why should they read, from your opinion, Let's Do Launch?
Well, it's the history of my career. Uh, there aren't any other books I think that are written about getting into the talent agency business, or
Uh-huh.
at least I haven't encountered any or any titles that would be along the same lines. So I think it's a good basic uh, training type of a book, how to learn to become a talent agent,
Hmm.
or how to become successful as a performer. There are 20 some odd chapters, and they're each spelled out methodically. The book is not, it's only a little less than a couple hundred pages. Each chapter is maybe about uh, 10 pages long, roughly. And it, uh, I think it's a good primer. It's a good basic um, book that will give people who are interested in either going into the entertainment industry on the business side, and the side I would recommend and suggest would be the talent agency side to learn it, or it's a good primer also for a performer, an actor, as to what they have to do, the steps they have to take to try to become recognized, seen, uh, employed in the acting profession.
So, so did you have a
So
mentor? Did you have a
it's just
mentor?
um,
Did you
the book has been.
did you have a mentor, or did you learn by doing?
I learned by doing. I didn't have any
Okay.
specific. So, no, I learned
Mhm.
by being exposed to many different mentors. Those were my years at MCA when I first got into the training um, program there, and I spent I spent several years, well, I'm guessing 7 or 8 years at MCA, and I probably would have continued to work at that agency today, or for the 60 years I was in the business. But what happened to MCA is I didn't pick myself up and leave MCA. MCA left me. Now, what I mean by that is it left me and about uh, 800 or 900 other employees around the world. The founder of MCA was a man named Jules Stein, and then he eventually passed the leadership on to a man by the name of Lou Wasserman. And Lou Wasserman built MCA to be the successful agency that it was, with offices all around the world,
Mhm.
all these employees, et cetera. And at, at one point, or at some point in time, he, maybe it was 1960, or maybe in the 1980s, he came across an opportunity where Universal Pictures, Universal Studios, had a huge uh, company, many different films they had produced. They had a large uh, uh, area where the studio existed in the valley here in Los Angeles. Several acres. They had several sound stages. Uh, anyway, the bottom line is they decided to put themselves up for sale. And Lou Wasserman at MCA came along and bought Universal Pictures. And when he bought Universal Pictures, he then, MCA came into a different form of business at that point. They were now in the motion picture and television production business, as well as they were in the talent agency business, three separate areas there. And what happened is uh, they uh, they were buying all of their talent, their performing talent, their writing talent, their directing talent. Universal Pictures was buying all the talent, all their artists from the talent agency. So it was being bought internally. And as a result, the other talent agencies that would try to get in the front door of Universal Pictures were having trouble. The William Morris agency was having trouble selling their talent. The ICM agency was having trouble selling their talent, and they felt that MCA and Lou Wasserman had become a monopoly, and that they were in violation of the Sherman-Clayton Antitrust Act. And so William Morris and ICM filed a lawsuit against MCA, saying you should not be allowed to continue in business in both those areas because it's a monopoly. And it took 2 years for that to make its way through the legal systems. And it was during the Kennedy administration, when Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General, the decision finally came down, and the government, US government, told MCA, you cannot continue in both areas. You have to choose one area or the other. You can't stay in the talent agency business and also be in motion picture and television production. And so it was an easy choice for them, because the amount of money that they'd made in prior years was significantly higher in motion picture television production than what they earned in talent agency commissions. And so they had to get rid of the talent agency division if they were to stay in business, and that's what they did. But the government, Robert Kennedy, Attorney General's Department, in the directive that was issued from their department, uh, they were told you cannot fire, you cannot terminate all of the agents who are employees of the company. If you're going to go into motion picture and television production, you have to offer jobs of employment to all of the agents who work there. And that's what they did. So I was one of of several hundred agents, and I'd say 95% of the talent agents who were offered the jobs, a motion picture television production, 95% of the employees of the talent agency division took up the offer and went to work in motion pictures and television production. And I saw this as a golden opportunity for us, the other 5%. This gentleman I've worked with, his department worked in, his name was Noel Rubeloff, and I convinced him and persuaded him that we should go out on our own because our clientele were no longer represented. We had a large amount of clients we could represent, and it was an instant talent agency with talent that was in demand, artists that were being marketed and sold, and were working, generating agency commissions. And that's when I set up our agency, Abrams, Rubeloff and Associates. He and I went into business together, and so it was a golden opportunity to start off on our own, and that's what we did at that time.
And so, Harry, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed this. You've been listening to and watching Harry Abrams, whose book is Let's Do Launch. I'm Cynthia Pooler. So, if you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Harry, thank you so much, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Cynthia. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye bye.